Hello and welcome. 120 million people have lost their jobs in the last 2 months, thanks to the devastating effect of the coronavirus. More importantly, many of these jobs will never come back in the manner that they existed before, thanks to some fundamental shifts in automation and the very nature of changing jobs. So the question is, who is going to bring those jobs back? Will it be manufacturing? It looks difficult, though we are expecting that manufacturing investments will move to India from China. It's not going to happen in a hurry. So could it be the internet and e-commerce economy, and by extension the gig economy, which has been seen for the last few years as a new creator of jobs? So that's the question we're posing today to our guests who come with diverse backgrounds and some sort of presence in this space. I'm joined now by Ateesh Tankha, who runs a fintech company and who's also been a banker based out of Singapore, Sabina Dewan, president of think tank JustJobs Network, and Haresh Chawla, partner of private equity firm True North and also earlier CEO of TV18. So let me begin with you, Sabina. So give us an overview. How are you seeing the shifts or likely shifts in coming months?
Thank you for having me, Govind. I think the important thing is to start by contextualizing this discussion and recognizing that all sectors of the economy are going to face a lot of pain once the lockdown ends, particularly small businesses that are really going to bear the brunt of this. 99% of the businesses in India are unorganized. So it's against this backdrop that we're going to see, the gig economy and e-commerce also being affected. But I think the key question here is there is going to be a limited amount of demand. And who is going to be able to capture that demand? Which sectors are going to be able to capture that demand? And I am of the mindset that we're actually going to see e-commerce and gig economy actually grow and capture more of that limited demand that we're going to see than some of the other sectors. I mean, you mentioned manufacturing, but I think really we're going to actually see an acceleration of technology and e-commerce and the gig economy actually capturing a greater share of the limited demand that there is, and therefore, having actually creating more jobs.
Okay. Harish, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so my sense is, see, what's the future looking like? Let's look a few months out. What really is going to happen that till we have a vaccine and till 1.5 billion people are vaccinated, we are all going to really start taking care of ourselves and reduce human interaction. Every walking, talking human being is a live grenade, and every surface that a human being has touched is a live mine, right? So what's going to really happen is that I find that you will find startups will pivot to services, right? And which will allow us to reduce human interaction. So therefore, you'll want deliveries at home. You will want, the fact that you go into a restaurant is one thing. You may want to go there, but you're actually sharing the air in the restaurant as well, right? You're sharing the same air conditioner. So there are some of these things will emerge. I don't think currently we've adjusted to the idea. I think our minds are locked into the idea as the lockdown ends, normalcy will come back. Actually, the end of the lockdown is the beginning of non-normalcy, because you can't just walk in somewhere, shake somebody's hand, pick up a menu from somebody, take some cash from somebody. So you find that a whole new layer of services essentially will get accelerated suddenly, where everything that you want will have to be sanitized. So therefore, it has to be a high amount of trust with whatever limited human interaction is possible or needed. So I think in that sense, I don't even know whether we can imagine all the services that will emerge as we go along, right? Because you'll find all these companies, the Kirana delivery started, milk delivery started, cashless deliveries will start. I think food is a whole new segment that will take on a new meaning, because remember, people may not allow their cooks to come back, right? So therefore, I think the first 60 days have been fun for people cooking, baking bread and all this stuff. But when you come back to work and when the pressures of revenue start, people won't have the time to handle all this. So I think we're seeing a reconfiguration of our lives, which is going to happen. And that life will be much more assisted, but with much less interaction, if that's one way to put it.
But do you see jobs, do you see that a whole set of jobs will either disappear, or are you seeing the further creation of new jobs, as Sabina was saying?
Wherever human interaction is high, those jobs will actually disappear completely, because those firms won't be able to survive. So even if you want beauty treatment at home, right, you're not going to allow a stranger to walk into your house, right? So there are services that will completely evaporate because they won't be able to withstand the 6-8 months of behavior change. And there are others that will come in which are helping you reduce interactions. So you're getting a service, it's pre-packaged, it's sanitized, and it's being delivered to you. So I think you'll have to examine each let's say, vertical of human consumption differently now. We have to go back to zero base and say, here is what the person wants. I don't think our wants and needs are going to go away. I think that's a temporary phase. Of course, there is going to be a huge income compression, and therefore the number of people consuming will go down. But overall, we'll all come back to our instincts of, there'll be a new level of aspiration that arise. Now we can't travel abroad and put photos on Instagram. You will do something else with that time and money, right? So I think some of these things will come back. But in each segment of need, we have to re-examine what the consumption pattern will be. And my sense is that these new companies are more fluid and are in a position to react to all this better.
Okay, right. So Ateesh, that's a good point to hand it over to you. So you've argued in a recent article that the concept of disruption itself is at question now because there's almost nothing left to disrupt in a market where demand is shrinking so dramatically. So explain that.
So I have a slightly different point of view. While I agree with both Sabina and Harsh, I think what we're going to see going forward is a lot of consolidation, right? So you can already see the Amazon and Future Group coming together. You can see Reliance, forging ahead with WhatsApp and Facebook. Google is already making strategic investments in Airtel, right? And then, of course, you've got the Flipkart Walmart combo over there. As you think about e-commerce, and I'm only going to talk about 3 parts to e-commerce, right? One is about sourcing and payments. One, of course, is typically e-commerce, where you're buying and selling either through a marketplace or directly. And then last mile delivery. I get a feeling that each of these players actually has some or all of this, and they are going to now try to consolidate and pretty much jam out all the small players. And if you think about it, a lot of people think that's a bad thing. And yes, usually an oligopoly is a bad thing because once you get an oligopoly, the race to the bottom in terms of pricing plateaus out as there's a certain level of collusion that happens. But on the flip side, when you look at Zomato, when you look at Swiggy, when you look at Paytm, when you look at half these companies out there, they were never built to last. They were built for sale, right? And the moment you are built for a sale, you have very little responsibility to your employees. The concept of appreciation of wage labor completely disappears. And so the only guys who really benefit from any kind of exit, it could be a sale, it could be a merger, it could be an IPO. Of course, none of these guys are anywhere close to a profit, so let's forget about an IPO. It's the guy on the street, the average, and I hate to say this, these people are not highly skilled. They're not unskilled, but they're underskilled. So tomorrow, let's look at Uber and Zomato. When they merged in that all-stock deal, there was a 15% job cut. 15% of those drivers, those delivery boys, just their jobs are vaporized, right? Tomorrow, if somebody buys a Zomato or a Swiggy, don't you think there's going to be a lot of consolidation? The moment there's consolidation, there's going to be optimization. That means there's going to be job compression. And in a country like India, where 72% of the entire workforce, I think you talked about 99% being this unorganized sector, 72% of the workforce is in the informal sector working in companies whose entire size is less than 6. Right? So if you think about what makes up the bulk of jobs in India, it's the MSME sector, it's the small sector. This small sector doesn't have the money to go in for robotics. It doesn't have the money to go in for automation and mechanization. And so it's still cheaper, better, faster to use people. So if you ask me, where is the great hope for India? It's in the MSME sector. The big guys, think about manufacturing, think about auto, think about FMCG, think about any other manufacturing plant. The one thing they've realized from COVID-19 is human beings are unreliable, right? Tomorrow there'll be a COVID-19 relapse, and once again, my factory will be shut for 2 months. So instead of that, let me try and automate as quickly as I can, bring down my workforce. For every 100 people I use today, maybe use 42 years from now. Those 60 people are gone. So McKinsey can talk about reskilling and all of that. I've been hearing that for 10 years in the US. I want to shoot myself sometimes, right? But it doesn't really happen. It doesn't happen on the street. Right. So what is the great hope for India? For me, it's the MSME sector. And frankly, as you think about where the government should invest, without a doubt, they should invest in modernizing and equipping the MSME sector, giving them the kind of working capital feeds and loans that they need to really become robust enough to withstand a COVID-19 or anything else in the future. It doesn't really matter, right? For me, that's where I see the future.
Yeah. Haresh, go ahead.
No, so yeah, I know we should do all these things, but the challenge is that a demand compression of this scale, right, is going to dry up and kill most MSMEs. That's the biggest challenge. These people actually drive jobs and drive demand as well. It's the MSME who goes buy the new car, buys the new motorcycle, right? So therefore, we have a cyclical demand supply spiral going on now. That we first had demand collapse. Now the supply chain links are broken, right? And then supply chain links break, and then those jobs go, and those create a fall in demand. So my sense is that, those MSME jobs will go, right? And I'm hoping that the consumption pattern of the top 15, 20% Indians, who are basically driving this nation's consumption and driving the trickle down of income, actually, that shifts versus stops. If it shifts, it will go towards the gig economy. It will go towards a higher amount of services. You will stop going out. You'll start getting services in, right? So it is a hope that, one fall in demand on one side of the economy can be made up partially by the fact that these other services become available. Of course, discounts and, funding for these startups will be under pressure. But the fact is that now people's willingness to pay also will go up. I think that, remember that I think all the rules of the past are gone. So there will be a new situation where, people are happily paying MRP prices to buy from the local Kirana store, then go to a large shopping mall, right? Anyway, they're not open. But ideally, the whole idea that you're serviced from a store that you're next to you, and you know that he's not giving you all the discounts that the big retailers are, right? But there's trust. There is comfort that delivery happens. There is comfort I can return it. I can talk to somebody. He will give me a reasonable substitute because there is stockouts going on all the time. So I think the way we will behave will probably help this new startup economy to some degree. As I said, not overall. Wherever the interaction is going up, is going to completely go away. But wherever they can pitch in, right, with some level of labor component being built in, I think we'll gladly consume it, because it's just too dangerous to go out and carry a disease back home. Remember, we stay, or most of us stay with the elder person in the house.
That's right.
Right. Okay, Sabina, so are you able to, I know it's a little early to do these kind of computations, but are you able to see how it's netting off, if it is?
Well, I always stay away from the netting off point here, Govind, but I wanted to come in on this and say, I don't think that any of us, the three of us, are actually disagreeing with each other. I think what we're doing is actually describing different aspects of the current moment that we're in. And so the one thing is that Harsh was mentioning is that there is going to be a change in consumer preferences, right? And definitely, prior to the crisis, we already saw that, according to the periodic labor force surveys, that unemployment had, ticked up to 6.1%. And now, according to the CMIE data, we're looking at almost 1 in 4 people being unemployed. Informality in the non-agricultural sector was already at 68%. Now we're more likely to see, as unemployment also ticks up, that there's also going to be people that are displaced even more into informal employment. And so those numbers are going to go up. And so there is, on the demand side, this complete restructuring of consumer preferences, and rising unemployment means that people no longer have the money to spend. And so they're, going to be much more prudent about what they buy and what they spend money on. So all of these demand side changes are going to take place. On the other side, you've got exactly what Ateesh was talking about, which is this consolidation, right? But I wanted to just nuance that a little bit further, because I do think that we are going to see this kind of consolidation, particularly because so many small businesses are going to collapse. But we're also going to see a much more geographic specialization. What do I mean by that? Amazon India has started a local shops initiative where they're actually starting to get small businesses online and deliver from these businesses to the consumer, sort of the last mile delivery, but also potentially expanding the market for these small businesses. So you're going to see a lot of these big businesses that have the capital reserves to withstand the current pain actually consolidate, buy out some of these small businesses, but they're going to be expanding into services that cater to this new kind of demand, whether it's looking at online learning, which has completely taken off, or we're looking at food tech, or we're looking at new forms of health tech. So there are going to be these new kinds of jobs and these new kinds of initiatives that are emerging. And the third point that I wanted to make was simply that the point that I started with. So the question is that we all know that there's going to be fewer jobs. So I'm not suggesting that these sectors are going to create net new jobs, right? There's going to be massive losses, but these sectors are going to create jobs that we haven't foreseen before, but the net impact will still be a massive loss of jobs in the economy. It's just, where are the limited number of jobs that are going to be created? Where will they be created?
Right.
And the
okay.
one last point I want to make really quickly, Govind, which is a quality of employment issue, right? When brick and mortar businesses are going out of, are going out of business, basically, you're going to see more delivery boys, more people in the gig economy that are lower skilled, that are, taking their cars and saying, I'm going to be an Uber driver, and kind of entering the gig economy. What's going to happen is you're going to have an oversupply of labor in those sectors, which is going to further depress the wages and the working conditions in those sectors. And that's something we need to watch out for.
Okay, Ateesh, let me come back to you. So, when you talk about consolidation, and maybe that will happen, and you're saying that we could see oligopolistic conditions, and which might be good in a way. But to your mind, is that a positive contribution, or is that how are you seeing it?
So when if you're talking about the contribution to employment, I think just an oligopolistic situation where you have these big majors who are already in e-commerce consolidating further, I think there'll be loss of jobs. So, I mean, that's the short answer. However, I do want to make one thing clear, taking off from where Harsh talked about the crimping of demand, right? Everybody is uncertain. You're right, nobody wants to go out. But you also don't want to go out because you don't want to spend too much money, because you don't know if tomorrow you're going to get the sack. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be an MD, you could be just a worker on the streets, right? So you're going to be a little careful about how you spend your money. So the place where you will spend your money most often and most frequently is in everyday spend, the food basket, other stuff that you need to buy for the house. And you're very right. While earlier you used to go to the Kirana store, you used to go to the mall, now you're hoping that it can all be delivered home, right? Having said that, let's look at who are the guys who used to put those goods into the Kirana stores. You got the likes of ITC, HLL, Procter & Gamble, Nestle, etc. Their strengths, and I don't know if you agree with me, and I used to work in ITC for many, many years, their strength does not come from product development. Their strength does not come from marketing, even though they like to tout all of that, right? Their strength comes from distribution. So if indeed this vaccine takes too long to develop, and if indeed they realize that the world has changed, and now even though the vaccine has been developed, people don't want to go to the store anymore, right? They'd rather just order home. They will not completely subcontract that to an Amazon, a Flipkart, a Zomato, or anybody else. They're willing to try it now, right? So even today, ITC has tied up with Zomato and Swiggy. I know this for a fact. My own parents order some stuff in and stuff like that. But if they see that this is where the world is going, they will step up a challenge and create their own kind of e-channel to compete. Because that's where your strength is. In fact, many companies in America make the big mistake of subcontracting channel dynamics to Amazon, and then it was the long kiss goodnight, right? Because once you've paid the Dane can't get rid of the Dane, right? You're going to keep paying that guy, and he sets the price. Guys like these big FMCG majors do not like you to set the price in the channel, because that's how they control the wholesale and retail dynamics. That's how they make sure that the bottom doesn't fall out of the market, right? So that may be another interesting trend to see how these typical brick and mortar companies, if indeed the trend veers away towards e-distribution and e-buying and selling, they themselves may start moving into that space. So that's another.
So there is creation, production, distribution, and so where could the jobs? Because we started this discussion really asking about jobs, and if and whether the internet and e-commerce economy can continue to be an engine of some sort, and that's what we want to come back to as some sort of working conclusion for this discussion. So how do you see that?
So currently, my sense is e-commerce is a tiny fraction of, let's say, the food and grocery market in India. Tiny. It's an irrelevant number. So that number is going to shift. See, even though, on the mobile phones or electronics or white goods now, e-commerce market shares have crept up. The fact is in food retailing, yes, we have big basket, but really it's sub 1 or 2% points in the overall food and grocery consumption.
Yep.
So now we'll have to qualify the word e-commerce. If you can, I have a retailer next door who takes my order on the computer. I have to make my shopping basket. I send him the order. Next morning, a WhatsApp message comes. This is the amount and this is the order number. Come to my store. My bag is ready outside with my order number. I sit in my car. I call out my order number. He comes and drops the bag in the back of my car. In a sense, this is technology-enabled commerce. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm not don't want to narrowly define e-commerce, right? So I'm saying, do you access your customers in a contactless manner over the internet? I mean, that's the revolution that's coming. Will that require more people on the back end? Of course it will. Will it require more people in servicing? Of course it will. Has this shop been able to kill or get market share from other shops in the neighborhood? Yes, it has. His business is up 3 or 4x. And therefore, he's employing more people. So I think net, as Sabina is saying, the net number of jobs, of course, we have a disaster sitting there. On two fronts. One is the demand collapse, which means the jobs are going to go away because of that. The other is the migration that's taken place. Those people, they hate uncertainty. They are not aggressive, entrepreneurial type. They want certainty of income so that they can send some money back home. Now they've suddenly gone back home where they can live within 50 to 100 rupees a day comfortably because they have a roof over their head. They have no uncertainty. So I think remember that these people have shifted to the cities after a generation of getting, confidence to deal with the big bad town, right? They've suddenly all gone back in clusters. So we have, multiple, dynamics playing out right now in this country, which is in some senses horrific because we don't know what lies at the end of a 3-month or a 6-month period.
So that's a good point. And let's talk about that as well, right? So you've seen tens of millions of migrants leave big cities or even mid-sized cities for villages, and they continue to walk in the most horrific manner even as we speak right now. So that is again going to have some kind of play on labor dynamics. Sabina?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think first, I wanted to also mention that what Ateesh was talking about in terms of Nestle and so on, kind of having the last mile delivery and expanding in that way. I think this kind of servicification of manufacturing has been going on for a long time, and now we're going to see that trend accelerated. And also, I think we're going to see a greater vertical integration. But again, the net impact of that on jobs, it's more about who the players in the job scenario are going to be, rather than them adding more jobs to the economy, if that makes sense. With regards to migration, I mean, I think the focus, of course, has to be first on how there's been a huge lack of trust in government capacity to provide for workers. And we've seen kind of the unbelievable relaxing of labor laws and the constraints that people are placing on migrant workers that are trying to get home. In my personal view, I think that that's ridiculous for an economy that considers itself to be an emerging power, a democratic society. We have to do a better job of taking care of our workers and of our people. I also believe that labor laws and it's a longer and maybe a different discussion about labor laws, but are not a major constraint in terms of what keeps our businesses small. But that's another discussion for another time. Eventually, I think people will migrate again if the jobs are there. Right now, in the short to medium term, we're going to see a huge labor shortage, as we already are. But I think people will leave their villages and move back to wherever the jobs are because they will be desperate to make a living. The question is, will their jobs be there when they move back to the city? And here, I think, is where, the platform economy, the e-commerce is going to emerge as a potential job provider. But we all know that self-employed people that enter the gig economy don't always improve their living standards and don't always get the amount of work, right? It's just a small subsidization of their living expenses. It's not enough to actually live on. So those are the kinds of dynamics that are going to play out in the coming months.
Right, Ateesh, you've talked about disruption and how disruption itself may not be really effective because there is no market really left to disrupt in that sense. And I'm sure you said it in a manner of speaking. How do you see the next few months? I mean, are there possibilities of disruption now in this kind of environment, or is it more it's really defensive play till the end of the match?
So I mean, as you think about the gig economy and you think about all the startups out there, right, whose original model may have been A, and now they're suddenly playing into B or C, I think it's really about survival, right? Having said that, some of them, I'm sure, are going to find a sweet spot whereby, because of a certain service that they are providing to, a non-typical client of the past, right, where they were B2C, for instance, Zomato is now veering big time B2B, right? They've tied up with Hyatt, they've tied up with a lot of other FMCG majors, etc. If they are able to provide an economic channel, right, where they're not busting up crores of rupees just trying to get in new customers or to achieve a sale, right? I think there's a long-term play for that over there. In fact, if you ask me, whereas Zomato was hoping to be bought up by another big e-commerce major, if Zomato really proves its creds here, you may actually find a completely unconventional buyer, like an FMCG company, 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, saying, you know what, since in any case I had to build this channel and I've worked with these guys for 6 months, why don't I just take them out? Right? So there is, or you may actually start finding a consortium of companies, right, deciding to invest big time into these startups and giving them a much needed lifeline, right? I just want to make one point in regards to the migration and the workers, right? And I just want to strike a parallel between the US and in India, right? There's still two industries in the US which are very labor intensive. One is construction, as it is in India, right? And the other is transportation, including last mile delivery, as it is in India, right? The two other industries which are labor intensive in India but not labor intensive in the US anymore are agriculture and then warehousing. So as you think about these millions of people on the march all over India trying to get home, right, almost 80% of them fit into one of these four industries, right? You've got the agricultural sharecropper, you've got the kind of guy who used to work on a contract basis in a warehouse, hauling, unhauling, the transportation khalasi, etc., etc. I get a feeling that over the next few months and years, it's going to pretty much mimic what's in the US. That means as far as transportation goes and as far as construction goes, there's still going to be unskilled job requirements. But the other two sectors are going to shrink very rapidly, including warehouses. I mean, one of the biggest shocks I got in my life was about 7 years ago when I went to an Amazon warehouse. It was 240,000 square feet and it was a good 60 feet high, palletized, stacked, etc. There were only 4 people in the warehouse, none of whom had anything to do with warehousing. 2 were photographers, one is a security guard, and one guy looked after the server to make sure nothing crashed. Everything else was robots, right? So I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow in India, but over a period of time, mechanization and automation is just going to make certain processes more reliable. Transportation and construction, I mean, for the foreseeable future, I think will continue to offer jobs to these unskilled and underskilled laborers, right? The gig economy, if it is able to latch on to traditional commerce, and Harsh was saying that currently e-com in EDC, everyday spend, accounts for almost nothing, 1% or 2%. If they're able to latch on, I think they've got a lifeline. If not, they're going to suffer a lot of challenges.
Haresh, last word as we go out. How are you seeing it? Like I said, we started by saying, are there going to be jobs? And you make a lot of investments in this space. How are you seeing prospects?
No, as I said, I think, coming back to the word disruption, I think there is no more pure play disruption right now, especially in India. What really we are seeing is disruptive modes of consumption. And my sense is a lot of that is going to take off now because the consumer is ready. He's scared, needs this new mode of distribution, new mode of access available, needs the comfort and trust that this person who's the other end of this chain of delivery is sanitized, can be trusted. The kitchens are trying to live stream their cooking, right? You read about that. So therefore, I'm saying that this, if you really call, Amazon doesn't make a new soap, right? It sells you the same soap. It's just a mode of access that's disruptive. It's so convenient. You press the button, it arrives with 100% certainty next morning, right? So there are these other things all around this whole process of consumption that are disrupted actually. And those, my sense, are going to get accelerated dramatically because now you no longer need to pay the customer to change habit. You know what I'm saying? In the last few years, startups have been paying in a way, bribing the customer, change your habit, don't go out for dinner with your family, order in a large meal from a restaurant, right? Now the customer is primed to change habit. Actually, it's desperate to change habit because remember, as our incomes, as you will find the income hit coming, you will postpone all the big purchases. You won't buy a new house, you won't buy a new car, you won't buy a new TV, you won't buy a new air conditioner. You will end up having the daily meal being better. You'll end up making these small purchases. Maybe have a better brand of whiskey, for example, right? But I think those small pleasures you won't take away from your life and family. But the big purchases are going to get postponed, and that's going to be another hit on the demand and jobs on other sectors which Ateesh spoke about. So I think there is a complete interplay here through the consumer and their behavior.
Right. Thank you all. I think so. The objective of this discussion was to start this unraveling and try and understand which of these pieces is likely to maybe remain where it is, or we could lift, and how do we put it together again as we emerge from the lockdown, either on May 17th as we are supposed to, or maybe a little later, but emerge we will, and obviously into a Hobson's choice where we have to, in some ways, make a dramatic choice between lives and livelihoods. We'll, of course, keep coming back with more discussions around jobs and where they're headed. Stay with us, and thanks for watching.
Thanks.